network is your net worth, especially in gaming. Eventually, if you build out your network and you start having these connections with people, you find yourself that crack in the door gets a little bit wider.
Today I'm joined by a former Unity and Quali exec who's now leading Turborilla as CEO, the mobile studio behind the Mad Skills franchise, which has been downloaded over 200 million times.
You don't get better playing worse competition. You only get better playing better people. Why is it that we should be happy with 36% day one retention in this region? Why can't we get to 40%?
We talk about why most devs misunderstand publishing, what separates a good mobile game from a scalable one, and how to fix your live ops strategy before scaling, and also how to kind of get ahead in the games industry.
The major difference between gaming and finance is cutthroat. It's all about you and the I, whereas gaming is all about the we, that we're in this together. Business, as well as life, is about trusting people. You need to build out those relationships and those trusts, because if you want someone to follow you, you need to lead by example. You need to show that you will do what you say you will do.
From someone who's advised studios, invested in top-grossing games, and now leads one of mobile's most iconic racing franchises, this episode's guest and friend, CEO of Turborilla, John Wright. Hi, John.
Hey, Harry. How's things?
Things are very well. Very sad I didn't actually get to see you develop. Why didn't you go develop this year?
I actually was meant to come for one day, but it was my wife's birthday on the 10th. So family firsted. I decided to... Yeah, I was going to come on the Wednesday, but then I had another engagement. But then it was my wife's birthday, and I just decided to put family first on this time.
There's always another develop, and your wife is definitely never going to forget that if you went to develop. So no, 100% agree. Yeah. Sweet. So yeah, thank you for joining. I'm really excited for today's chat. I want to quickly start some context for people. I've known John very long time, kind of like on and off. And if I remember, like the way we met was a long time ago. I think we did a very tiny conversation podcast back when I was a recruiter, and then we've kind of just stayed in touch over the time. And like more recently, I think we did an introduction, and you invested in one of the companies I did an introduction with. Then you've helped me as well, introduced me to a lot of people over the years. And it's been kind of like we're helping each other, but it's always like from the sidelines. And then we follow each other on LinkedIn. It's like a very weird relationship, but I like it. It's very unique.
No, bro, we're just connected. This is like, we're just like, like we're connected. I look at you as an industry friend. We hang out, we talk life, we talk, other stuff. But ultimately, we're both in the same industry, and we're all about, helping people, connecting people, growing the space. And you do that, I do that. And then sometimes together we do that. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, lovely. Alrighty. So for everyone at home, we're going to get into 3 parts today. So we're going to start on leadership and team building, and then move on to more the nitty gritty of like mobile publishing and then game economics and scaling. So I want to start with a little story, John. So you and my dad actually share a crazy similar origin story. So my dad, because his grandfather wanted him to do well, paid him to become an accountant. So he trained him, became a university, and he did something slightly different to you, but you probably resonate. On his last month of his university degree, he was getting top grades, but he dropped out because he was like, if I get this degree, I'll be cursed to do accounting. And he's just like, I can't do that. And then what he ended up doing is he started like fish and chip shops and became more of a carpenter, which is a lot more what he wanted to do. But like, there's definitely a different timeline for him. So I'd love to hear, like, you wrote in an article once that you had an identity crisis at 25. Like, I'd love to hear, like, now you're the CEO of a gaming studio, but at 25, that was probably not on the card. So, yeah, could you tell me about what happened then?
Yeah, dude. Like, starting off very simply, I come from a very sort of modest background. I grew up on a council estate in East London. And I think from a society perspective, the culture what I come from is all about the future generations progressing and becoming something more. And my parents, very instilled me in a very young age that they didn't want me to be a builder like my dad, or my mum was a nurse, and they were like, okay, you need to think about education. Like my dad dropped out of school at 14, my mum dropped out of school at 15, both for the most honourable reasons, which was my dad had 3 sisters, and that we needed money on the table post World War II, so he went to work and to put money on the table to support his family. My mum, her father had cancer, so she dropped out of school to become a living carer, right? So they did the most honourable thing I know, but that did not set them up to have money, right? And look, we had an amazing, like, my parents were very loving and were married for a long time until my dad passed away. But ultimately, they were always instilling into me and my brother, like, you need to do something, right? You need to have a profession. You need to become like, or have a trade or do something with your life. And so I remember being like 14, speaking to a high school guidance counselor and not having a clue what I wanted to do, right? And you're at that age, you're going into like preparing for your GCSEs. And at the time when I went to school in the UK, you left school at 16 and then you had to make a conscious choice to go to college. It wasn't like now where you work up to 18, study up to 18. So my high school guidance counselor looked at my grades and said, "You're really good at maths and statistics. Like, you should be an accountant." And then that was the start of an 11-year journey of me like spending 11 years of my life studying, working, dedicating myself to something that I had no passion in or did not enjoy in the slightest, just because I was trying to do the social cues of, I want to progress, I want my family to have an easier life than I did growing up. I didn't go abroad until I was 14. Like, all of the holidays we had, we didn't have a car, we didn't have disposable income to go to restaurants, and my family were like, we want you to do better. You want to give you opportunities, experiences, and so that was where it all came from, dude. And look, they did. Again, they wanted the best for me, and I loved them for it, but it was the wrong thing. I was kind of like funneled and pressured into something that I had no interest in. And like you said, at 24, 25, I was already married. I got married at 23 to my wife. So we've been married 15 years this year. And my wife sat me down and said, "John, like, every Sunday you're filled with dread." Like, I was getting anxious, Harry. I've never been an anxious person, but I was working at WPP. I was working in one of the biggest companies in Europe, right? A conglomerate of 150 companies, 150,000 people. And I was the youngest sort of management accountant in the entirety of the finance division. There was like 40, 50 other people. None of them came from my background. None of them spoke like me, had the same experiences as me. And I just felt out of sorts every time I go there. And then what I started to do, and this is so bad thinking about it, but I started to change the way I spoke, my mannerisms, the way I acted. It was like I was living a lie. I was pretending to be something I wasn't because I wanted to fit in. And then I realized, again, I had this moment with my wife when my wife was like, "You need to think about this. You need to change." And that was the best decision of my life. I decided, you know what? Like, I looked at the things that I was passionate about. I've always loved sports, and I played rugby at a good standard, and that was always my like personal thing. My weekends was playing and training during the week and stuff. And then I had my professional thing, which was the accountancy stuff. But then the other sort of constant in my life is I've been a hardcore gamer since I was 5 years of age, so which is nearly 35 years now. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. I'm gonna will it. And literally, it took me probably over a year, probably nearly 2 years. And equally, I had to do a sidestep from finance into performance marketing in e-commerce. And I was working with Ralph Lauren and Harrods before I got my opportunity to go to Greenman. And but all of that work and all of that effort paid off because I every day love what I do now. I feel like this is my purpose and it's my passion. So yeah, dude, that's the story, really.
It's super cool, and it's one where, at least in the games industry, it moves so fast. But like, if you were looking back at your career now, I feel like you're the CEO of Turborilla, right? You've got hundreds of millions of downloads. You've got a big team. I can just imagine like that as a snapshot. You just show it to the 23-year-old accountant. Like, they'll be like, "What interdimensional channel is this on? Like, how did this happen?" But then when you look back and it's like, "Oh, it makes sense retrospectively." But I can definitely see, like, when you started, "I'm going to will into gaming." Like, how can you predict like that's possible?
For sure, man. And look, the best advice I can give people who want to do the same thing, and a lot of people reach out to me about this and say,
About joining the games industry.
Yeah, like, how do I break into games? And actually, I met someone at a conference a couple of months ago, and they were in cybersecurity, and they were like, "John, look, I'm 25. I've been in cybersecurity. I got out of university 2 years ago. I got into cybersecurity because I was very good at engineering and data and all this other stuff. but he's like, I have no interest, no passion. It's just, I want to get into games. And, we had a 30-minute exchange at a conference. I gave him some advice, and I talked about transferable skills and how do you build out your network? How do you actually establish connections? Because you're much more likely to get an in through someone and someone who can vouch for you than if you're going in cold, right? And so I gave him some advice, and then 2 weeks ago he pinged me, "Hey John, do you remember we had this conversation 4 months ago? I've just closed my first job in gaming, and it was from a connection that I established." So I introduced him to a company, and he connected with one of my friends who used to work with me in a previous business. I basically gave my friend some context, and now he's starting his new venture in games on Saturday, and it was all because he listened. He was like, "Okay, transferable skills." Help build out network. Like, network is your net worth, especially in gaming. And, working on those things, like I said, if you're not in gaming right now, there's nothing stopping you going to game jams. There's nothing stopping you going to events like your one, Tarry. There's nothing stopping you going to bigger ones like Gamescom. There's nothing stopping you, being part of communities and discords and gamer groups, right? And eventually, if you build out your network and you start having these connections with people, eventually you find yourself that crack in the door gets a little bit wider.
100%. My role as a recruiter was very much just like, you're already good, you're just not telling your story very well. And what you just said there is like, you probably gave the context. That context was like, he's a go at all of these things in cybersecurity, which is why I think he will be able to solve these problems. But if you're trying to break into an industry, you might not know what problems they're willing to pay for right now. So like, you need, my biggest advice is very similar to yours. Like, find someone, because they do exist, who's willing to give you 15, 20 minutes, and then ask them like, "Hey, what are you right now needing, or your friends needing?" And then you position yourself as the person that solves that problem. And one more asterisk here, and I'll be curious to hear your opinion on this. I feel like when I started my agency last year, so I have a marketing agency, and right now we're ghostwriting for CEOs, and that is the main work. When I first started, like the first month, I pretty much just coached people, and the first 2 clients, I said, I'll do it in exchange for testimonial and feedback, so I didn't ask for money. But then I took that work I did, which is now I've coached someone big in games, and they got a real result. And then when I started the conversation, it's like, when you're pitching for money at a VC and you've said, "Oh, by the way, we've already got this person already committed," even if it's a tiny amount, it's just like, I can imagine the decision-making process becomes a lot easier, because it's like, someone else vetted them. So in your case, John Wright gave his unofficial stamp of approval. And I feel like you can get that. It might take a bit of quote unquote free work in the first couple months, but once you have that, compared to someone who doesn't have it, it's like night and day.
Yeah, man. Look, I think building out that credibility, and industry credibility is really important. And like you said, people in general in gaming, like the major difference between gaming and finance is cutthroat. People are throwing each other under the bus. Like, it's all about you and the I, whereas gaming is all about the we. It's about, we're in this together. There was a time, 20, 30 years ago where gaming was like, we were outcasts, like we're not the norm, and that was that. I think that built a culture of collectiveness, right?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to be with people who shared similar things to you, which maybe, again, weren't cool at the time. Now gaming is cool the same way that anime is cool, but, these things weren't at some point, and it took some time for people to understand that and break through that. But yeah, I think your advice is right. I've had a couple of people over the years who have just reached out to me randomly and asked for advice. And as long as, I've got the time and stuff like that, I'll always give it, right? And some of the best relationships I've developed over the last couple of years are from people that randomly messaged me on LinkedIn, asked for a call. I said, "You know what? Why not?" Had a chat with them. I helped, mentor them in their career a little bit, give them some advice. And then, a year later, 2 years later, they're saying to me, "Hey, John, I've started a company. Would you be an advisor? Would you invest? Would you do this? Would you do that?" And all of that pay. And my whole attitude is always pay forward, right? Like, if I help you, just help someone else. I don't care about financial gain. I'm sorted in that area. But if you can do this sort of stuff, dude, I think collectively it helps the industry grow, which inadvertently helps me because I've dedicated my life to this space. What I want more than anything is, positive growth in the industry, solid CAGR, like revenue going up year after year, more people gaming, because this is what I want to, this is my passion, what I've dedicated myself to. But again, don't be afraid to contact people and be open, and even at an event or something like that, just go over and say hi. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Too many people put too much pressure on themselves and try and do this stuff alone, which is what I did. That's why it took me 2 years to get into gaming, because I had to literally build out my experience in e-commerce to eventually qualify for a job. Whereas if I would have built out my network and done all this stuff that we've just discussed, I would have been able to leapfrog into gaming much sooner. I learned the hard way. And I didn't have a mentor or someone who could direct me and help. If you can just ask for help, and LinkedIn's a great place for that, and you get in a connection with someone, it will honestly expedite your process into doing this, right? It took 2 years for me. It took 4 months for the guy I mentioned who I met at an event, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think also that point you made, like, what's the worst that could happen? That is the case on LinkedIn and at conferences. Like, conferences, it's kind of, I have a weird take on conferences. Like, I feel like some people, because they've been in the industry so long, it's almost like a conference for them is like a vacation, and they treat it like one, and it feels like high school. Everyone's there. We're here for the same reason. And it's a weird vibe where everyone can be a friend with anyone because there's already a default connection that you have. And like saying hello to someone, like I've seen people go up to titans of the industry and say, hey, do you have any advice on me getting a job? And they sit there and give them like 20, 30 minutes of advice. Not everyone's going to do that, but definitely you can probably get that. And like you said, anyone can go to Gamescom. Like, for example, Develop Brighton, I think it costs 100 quid to go. But if you actually ask them and you're a job seeker, you pretty much get a free ticket. And I think a lot of conferences are able to do something like that. So yeah, just having that conversation with someone in the industry rather than be someone who's on the outside trying to join, massive game changer. And some LinkedIn math for people, if you send 100 connections to someone, if your connection's horrible, you probably still get 5 or 10 accepts, and maybe one person is willing to give you 15 minutes. Or if they don't have time, it's like, hey, do you mind replying with a voice note? What do you think I should focus on? You take what you can get, and then you can grow. You might get a John Wright and hit the jackpot. They're willing to give you some time, but you also might get something that will basically change your 2-year roadmap to like 2 months, because like, oh, actually, you don't need to do any of that you were planning to do.
Exactly. Like, don't ask, don't get, Harry.
Hell yeah. Sweet. Alrighty. So, John, CEO, big business. I would like to get into like, what does the day-to-day feel like? Because this is kind of unique, at least for me on the pod, where you've come in as a CEO of a business which has already been running. It's got a bit of a legacy. You have a team to run. You're new to everyone there. You haven't kind of been promoted to CEO. So I'd love to just, for people at home, like, what does your day-to-day actually look like right now?
Yeah, so like you said, Harry, Turborilla is a very long-standing business. Tobias, who's the founder, started it, out of university 17 years ago. It predates, the traditional mobile, which is where it's famous for. And ultimately, I was brought in because, there was some change in the business, and the previous CEO wanted to move on. And so we decided that, through connections and stuff like that, Tobias and one of the investors, connected me, and we decided to have a conversation about, like, what would it look like? What would Turborilla look like under the leadership of John Wright? And, to begin with, it's very different to a lot of the other positions I've had, where, at Luna, I built out the entirety of the team, right? Like, I was the founding team member, VP operations. I hired everyone individually. I picked people that I wanted for those positions. And it's very different between starting your own company and team versus inheriting someone else. So you have to be much more empathetic and understanding of the company when you are not creating it yourself, right? Like, you are inheriting it. And there is a massive psychological difference in how you manage the team, how you establish yourself. But the main points is you need to come on pretty quickly and prove you are someone that can be trusted. You say what you mean, and your word is your bond, basically. Like, you come on and you have to, reinvigorate, revalidate, motivate. And it's about, again, coming on and establishing yourself very quickly. as someone who can be trusted and stuff like that. Because this is the thing, like business, as well as life, is about trusting people, right? Like you need to build out those relationships and those trusts, because if you want someone to follow you, you need to lead by example. You need to show that you will do what you say you will do, right? And that was really the first couple of weeks for me, was about, addressing the troops, like inheriting a company of 25 people. And look, I've managed much more people in the past. I was managing 200 people at Quali. I was managing 40 at Luna. So it wasn't a case of establishing seniority, because I already had that with previous roles and I knew what I had to come and do. But CEO also is a very different fish compared to VPs or Cs, like, which are not CEO. Like, you are the top of the pyramid. Everything you say has more weight and onus behind it, right? The team really read into it. And sometimes this can be very good, and sometimes this can be bad, because you might say the wrong thing or you might be interpreted in the wrong way. And because you are the CEO, it does get more behind it. But yeah, like I would say, first and foremost, it was about establishing connection and trust. It was about, ensuring that the team were motivated, but also giving direction and understanding that, this is the outcome we're desiring, right? We want to not only make this the best company in the action sports arena, and the Mad Skills franchise has been downloaded over 200 million times. Our monthly active users is nearly 10 million. And, for the genre, it's done a lot, right? It is one of the most established franchises there. But how do you then take something that's kind of hit this kind of ceiling? How do you take it to the next stage? And that is really what my focus is going to be for the next 12 months with the team is, okay, we've done a great job up to now, but how do we, dial it up to the next level? How do we maximize what we have, and in the current catalog? How do we approach new games? Like, are we going to add an additional, like, we've already got Mad Skills 1, 2, 3. The logical thing would be to add another issue to the franchise, which at some point we definitely will. Sneak peek. And yeah, dude, it's about that, right? It's about making sure that everyone's on the same page, that you are leading by example, you are doing what you say, people can get behind you, they believe in you, because once you've got all of that trust and motivation, then you can you can set the standards, you can set the expectations and the outcomes that you want as a CEO, and you can trust in the people to deliver them. And collectively, when you're doing that across every vertical of the company, finance, legal, HR, UA, monetization, production, development, like, you need all of those individual pieces working to the top level, because if one of them is slightly lower, it could drag down the other. So you need to make sure that every part of that machine, all of those different cogs in the machine, are working to the top level. And being a CEO is about ensuring that happening.
I'm CEO of my little agency now, and I wanted to touch on the thing you said. Like, they got to a certain point, but by definition, you have now changed the business, and they now need to change their actions, right? And change is hard, which is what I'm realizing. So I wanted to use my current analogy and then ask you a question on change here. So I am hiring writers now, and it's been one very, very hard, because I either have the option of telling a writer to change the way they do things and also change what the definition of good or bad is, and it feels personal, or train someone from scratch. And I've realized, unless I've had someone do exactly what the way we do it, which is very few, I found like this middle thing is just so hard to get someone to change. It's just so much energy. And I'm feeling like, well, if the kind of North Star of your business has changed, but these people, they've probably been there. Some maybe probably been there for like 5, 10, maybe more years. They now need to, so now they need to change what they're doing. So maybe it's a very big question with very few words. Like, how do you manage change as the CEO in your business? Like, how do you navigate getting people to kind of change their behaviors while keeping kind of, I guess, satisfaction high and ownership high? Like, I found that very hard.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question. And I feel like instilling a culture of accountability is extremely important. So
how do you do that?
Well, I think you just have to be very honest with people. I think you have to set expectations. And again, it's about really aligning on what the short term, mid term, long term goals are, right? So, one of the first things I did after coming on board was, I put together like a 35 slide presentation about like the history of the company, where we've got to, and what like the expectations of where we're going to go to next. Because, like I said, the business has done well. It's pretty much number one in its category, but it's a niche category. It doesn't mean that you should be happy with hitting a glass ceiling in something where you can transcend, right? So why is it that we are happy with being the best in the action sports area? Like, why are we not happy, or wouldn't we be happier to be the best in casual games, right? Which is a much bigger TAM and stuff like that. So it's about reframing what, like you said, what good is, Harry, and what the expectations are, and making people truly believe that if they follow, this plan, and we do all of this stuff together, that eventually we can transcend where we were into something bigger and better. And I want our brand to be, again, not just the number one in its own vertical, but I want it to be much bigger than that. I want it to be a household name like King, right? Like, yeah, look, a couple of 100 million installs is fantastic, right? That's amazing. Like, yeah, nearly 10 million people every month play our games. That's crazy. If you were to think about putting 10 million people, in a place and lining them up, it would be more than the eye could see, right? That's incredible. But what's better than 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million,
Yeah. And it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was really about, like I said, and again, the other thing I did once coming on board, I sat down with every single person in the company and I said, what's the company do well? What does the company not do too well? What are the things that you would want to change if you could? And I started to like literally pinpoint the same themes from certain teams and certain people.
Can I ask you what was surprising there? Because I'm curious. I bet you came in with some expectations, but then someone probably said something you didn't expect.
Do you know what, man? It was very interesting because I think the culture of the business previously was not goal driven. It was very much like, okay, we're going to build the most incredible game we can, and we're going to launch that, and we'll see what happens, and we hope it's going to be bigger than the.
So is it more input driven then? Like, let's build the best game, rather than let's get X result from said game?
Okay, exactly. Cool. It was, like I said, it's a very creative culture, but the culture of the business lacks some of the structure that you would have from maybe more a corporate business or a bigger business or a public business, right? So everyone that I spoke to, the underlying theme was they felt like directionally they didn't know where the business was going long term. They didn't feel like a huge amount of accountability on their day-to-day actions. Like, they knew they were doing stuff and why, but what was the impact of that over a month or 2 months or 3 months? And so we re-established those frameworks. We gave people more clarity over what their ownership was, what their accountability was. We gave everyone new goals, and we made them very sort of quantifiable goals, so people knew, okay, am I doing well or not? And then we started to iterate, and I feel like that coupled with the increase in motivation, talking about the big picture and transcending where we were, and not just being happy, being not mediocre, but being in a place of comfortability, right? Like, you only grow through doing
discomfort.
hard things. Yeah, discomfort, exactly, right? There's David Goggins quote, be uncommon amongst uncommon people, but also like be comfortable in uncomfortable environments, right?
Yeah, it's like how muscles grow. And I think, just to put this point, because I found it really cool, like, I think Andrew Human did an interview with David Goggins, and he found that when the brain is doing something, it knows it's uncomfortable, but then does it and gets through it, like, a part of the brain actually grows bigger and stays bigger, and like becomes, objectively, now you have more ability as a human. I can imagine that's the same in a business. If you just never do something that's uncomfortable, then you would, by definition, plateau, and then because everyone else is probably doing uncomfortable things, you won't be progressing as fast as everyone else. So like, you need to have discomfort.
Yeah. And look, dude, my father used to tell me the saying, right? And it was always to do with like when I was playing rugby as a kid in a team and then as an adult. But you don't get better playing worse competition, right? You only get better playing, better people. And I think for me, it's the simple cases. We were comparing ourselves to other people in our very small niche and not comparing ourselves in our metrics and the levels that we were compared to other games that were much more successful in the casual area.
Mm.
But when you reframe that and zoom out and change the scope a little bit, you start to show people actually there is more, right? Why is it that we should be happy with 36% day one retention in this region? Why can't we get to 40%? These other games are doing that, so it's doable, right? We're not saying we're going to get to 80% day one, which is completely undoable. There's lots of games at that next stage. And what can we learn from those other games? How can we evolve and adapt as a business, become smarter, more efficient? And so now I'm challenging the guys to progress and push forward. And we're doing that by quantifying the structure, the goals, all of that stuff. And like I said, I think it was really positively received, like that people felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. I know what the expectations are. I know what the outcomes are. And it just gives people, that bit more accountability and understanding as to what they're doing.
Yeah, sweet. One more point on this, if that's all right. The question I have is, I had this experience when I was at a recruitment agency where they did monthly business reviews. That's what they called them. But at the start, when you joined the company, you did something called life mapping. It was like, okay, what do you actually want in a year's time, 5 years' time? And then we put that down as a personal, whether it's like number of money making, type of lifestyle, whatever house. And then we look at, okay, what needs to happen at this company for you to meet these goals and also personally. And then we try to align these two. And I found that objectively speaking, in gaming, alignment is just so out of whack after a company gets big. It gets so weird. I speak to people over the last couple of years, and they joined this big company, and now their incentive is, well, I need to get a better job title, so I need to manage more people. I'm like, wait a minute, what does the business actually want? Well, probably more profit and more revenue, but then not doing that because that doesn't align with what their goals are. Well, a lot of people say, well, I need to have this on the CV to be able to level up my position, and it's just like this alignment is like all over the place, and I'm trying to do that quote unquote right from the start. So I'm trying to hire a writer, but like if I hire a writer and they become exceptional, there's nothing stopping them becoming another job. So I'm like, okay, they need to have a next level. And in my head, I'm right. So I need to make a role that they could go into. Like, oh, this person likes to go conferences. All right. So that could be another thing that they level up eventually. And I'm wondering, how do you approach the problem of like aligning the person with the business? Is that part of the monthly one-to-ones? Is that the CEO's job? Is that someone else's job? Because I find that one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah, I think ultimately this is how you address the long-term strategy and direction of the business, ensuring that everyone is buying into like that big outcome that we want to do. And again, that could be XYZ things, it could be transcending your current station, it could be, again becoming a bigger name in this other genres, it could be a certain amount of revenue, it could be launching a new game, but all of these things. But you need to have one big thing that everyone can get behind, right? So setting that goal is important. But
Do you
I
have that
think,
goal, or is that
yeah,
secret? Is that
no, I
public
mean,
goal?
we have that goal. We have like in general, we've reset the expectations on what does good look like in the current catalog of games, and we have like a 5-point plan. It's like reorganize the economics and the balancing of the games. So that in turn will allow us to improve the monetization, which increasing the LTV is very important. That will allow us to do higher volumes of user acquisition, as it were, right? Because the LTV versus CAC calculation, the unit economics of games, is improved. Again, once we've scaled UA, that improves our DAO, and our DAO means that more people are playing our games, more people are enjoying it, but ultimately also means that DAO times LTV equals total profit, or total revenue, and then subsequent profit after user acquisition costs. So that's the basic 5-point plan for our back catalog. But equally, what that will allow us to do is if we can like maximize what we already have, then we can put some of that money to one side and then start talking about new projects. And that's what everyone really wants to do in games, right? Like everyone in our company and team wants to work on Mad Skills 4, But before we get to that point, we need to maximize what we've had. We've got to squeeze the lemon. And then once we've done that, we know we can wholeheartedly move on, knowing that the back catalogue is very stable and it's generating a good amount of money. And that stability gives us the ability to be more creative and build new things without worrying if we're going to overspend and, go from being profitable to being unprofitable, and from financial health and all of that stuff. So the short-term goal, doing that 5-point plan, is extremely important because it will unlock the ability to do bigger, more creative things, which is what everyone wants to do.
Nice. So I like that you've tied everyone's goal, which is work on Mad Max. Sorry,
Mad Skills Motocross 4.
So Mad Skills Motocross 4 is the big goal, but
Yeah.
you linked making the 1, 2, 3 make more money because that will give us resources to do everything that is done. But so you've not said, hey, to make more money in the business, let's do this first. You've actually connected it to, well, to actually do this, we need the resources. So I like that. You made it so the thing that might be less desirable is actually desirable because it gets us to the desirable state later.
Yeah, exactly. And so everyone knows now, look, if we work hard on maximizing what we have, then we could be more adventurous later with more confidence that the business is in a good position. And equally, that will allow us to grow and hiring more people. And that gives opportunities to individuals to step up.
Yeah. Because without that, it's not possible. So it's almost like, do you want what you say you want? Yes, then this needs to happen. And then here's the evidence. It's not like hey, we're doing this now, otherwise, see you later, we'll find someone else that does. It's much more like you're saying it without saying it. It's like, well, if you want what you want, we need to do this.
Exactly, dude. Look, if we want to grow, and so people, but look, some people don't see fulfillment through going to a manager role, Harry. Right? Not everyone wants to be, a manager. Like one of my good friends, who's ex Luna. I remember when we got after we got acquired. He was a director in Iron Source, director in Unity, and Unity were like, hey, like for you to step up to the next level, you need to manage 20 people. And he was like, but I don't want to manage 20 people. I just want to do what I'm doing. Like, I want to focus on product. Like, why is it that, industry and society says that for me to progress in my career, it means that I have to manage people rather than doing a really good job and a really smart job very well. And there is something in that, right? Like, it shouldn't be that way to many respects, because a lot of the time what you're then doing is taking maybe the smartest person in the room and then getting them to spend all of their time supporting other people, right? Rather than actually tackling the problem that only they can deal with.
It's very silly to me. Like, I am very lucky. Like, most of my jobs were effectively sales jobs, and the numbers are public. So there's almost like a leaderboard. Like, oh, that person's bringing that much business. He's also bringing in the business and delivering for it. And he's like, I've got a clear profit and loss. We know how much they're bringing the company. Happy days. And I'm trying to bring that to every single role in my company. Even the person who's doing my podcast, I've told him, like, look, if the podcast hits 3,000 subscribers and we get 1,000 views per podcast, we can then sponsor the podcast for effectively 10 grand a month, which gives me a lot more money to pay you. And then you can get a rev share. So this is historically a role where I could say, oh, you need to manage the editors and then you get a promotion. I was like, how boring is that? So I'm trying to make, and it's hard because I need to do math basically. And it's like, okay, how do we make every role aligned with, if you do better for the business, you get more compensation. So I'm going the very crude way maybe of just doing like a rev share and bonus structure for every single role. Maybe this will bite me in the ass, but I feel like what you said is, I saw that a lot where it's like the only way to get a promotion, objectively speaking, you just get a higher salary and more bonuses if you manage more people, and it's just title based. I'm like, well, just like you said, just weird alignment issues. Like, why don't we just pay someone if they're doing 10x the work? Maybe don't pay them 10 times more, but definitely pay them a little more. Call it principal or what have you. I don't know.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, if you want someone doing the best job possible, there's I have this thing which is called the happiness index. It's like a triangle, right? And it's essentially, what are the things that make people happy in their life? And one of them is or in their job. One of them is the amount of money they earn, right? That's one corner of the triangle. The second one is the work they do. Do they like it or not? And the third part is the people they work with, right? And if like this happiness index triangle, if you need to make sure, right, that at least two of those things are good or positive, because if two of them are bad, the triangle flips over, and that's when you get attrition, right?
Yeah,
So,
they're already thinking of the next steps and all that jazz.
exactly. But if you can do these 3-point triangle, and you can make sure that people are well compensated, that they're passionate about what they do, and the work is interesting and fun, and they work with a good team of people. And look, sometimes you have to be ruthless and you have to rip the bad route out, right? But that's the nature of leadership. So like I said, if you can do that, if you can balance those three things, normally most people are generally happy to work for a company, continue to work hard. And like I said, you need people motivated and happy if you want to get the best out of them, right? And overall, that's the best thing for the business.
Yeah, and for them as well. Perfect. I want to move more tactically now into like the mobile publishing strategy. So you name dropped Luma and Iron Source, and I was doing some checking and like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you manage nearly $2 billion in user acquisition at those companies. So
Yep,
that's a big number.
Yeah,
That's
$2 billion a year.
A year. Okay, so that's probably more than a lot of people will see in a life. But you, from my understanding, from a UA perspective, you're deciding where they put their money. Is that also? I also read that you did one of the first playable ad creatives that like did well. Is that right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, all of this. This is how I got my opportunity at Luna, because I was like Iron Source probably in what year would it have been? Like 2017, 2018. The playable ad wasn't an idea yet. It wasn't an ad unit. Like everything was either static banners or it was videos. There wasn't any way to interact with the playable. And then, someone had a really good idea about, back in the day, you'd always get like a demo disc, right, for like PlayStation Magazine. And it was that concept reapplied, Harry, to a new environment. It was okay if I give someone a demo of the game and give them the ability to play it for a certain small window of time, will they have a higher likelihood of downloading that game and whatever else? And the hypothesis ended up being proven true. And look, while Iron Source were not the first company to come up with this idea, there was one or two people before that. They were one of the first companies that doubled down on it and found success. And I remember, look, there was a case with, Machine Zone, which now is no longer, part of us. It was acquired by AppLoving and stuff like that. But, I think the year was probably like 2018, 2019. And we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and did hundreds of variations of playable ads. And they failed. Like it took like probably like 200 variations. But once we got to 200 variations, that ad was making like hundreds of thousands a day, right? So the investment was well worth it up to that point. But yeah, so I was part of that initial team doing that sort of stuff. And then that opened the door for Luna Labs, which was the first sort of big successful playable ad development company or technology, right? Before that, everyone was coding in HTML5. And what we did is we built a technology that allowed you to take what you already had in Unity, convert the code into a different code base that allows you to run these as ads. And look, we ended up selling that for a huge amount of money to Iron Source, and then Iron Source was acquired by Unity, and the rest is history. But all of it started from that one little playable ad that we did in 2017, 2018.
Man, so what's happened over the last 8 years? Tell me how much I can dig here, but like if someone's listening to this podcast, like I need to know the secrets of playable ads. Like how do they work? How do they don't work? Like you mentioned in one of your articles, I think it was a Moby Dictum article, that you wouldn't call yourself a veteran or an expert, but you're always learning. I'm wondering, like right now, like what's the scene like when it comes to user acquisition? Is there a big mistake you see in people make?
I think, look, like that comment, I think is true. I think anyone who calls themselves a guru or an expert or something like that, I'm not too sure I believe that. I think that with our industry, it's ever evolving, ever changing. Like if you take your finger off the pulse for a year or 2 years, things move along so quickly, and quickly you can become. You were an expert, but now you're not because you didn't keep up with it. And for me, I read and research every day. Right, every day. Every day.
You're not capping. That's true. So how does it actually look like? Is that articles? Is that
Yeah. So it's pretty much, it's like there's a few I can't. I've got some industry books by the side of me, but I don't want to bother like getting them all out. But like, I read industry books. I spend a lot of time reading very well put together LinkedIn posts from smart people that I follow. There's obviously blogs that I do, and then there's websites, like Games Forum, Pocket Gamer, all of these things. And every day I'm just trying to learn a little bit more, right? Like if you learn something new every day, you're on to something good in life, right? And I think you should always remain diligent and remain a student. I've always said that. Um, but yeah, like I said, obviously from a UA perspective, we've gone through an interesting time, Harry, over the last couple of years. It's 2021, we saw the highest sort of levels of user acquisition because of the hyper casual movement, right? And it was people were acquiring tens or hundreds of millions of users very, very cheaply. A CPI could be 30 cents, 40 cents. And the idea, very simply, was to acquire someone very cheaply and then very quickly make that money back, make a profit. But look, a profit on 30 cents is only 40 cents, right? And that's 10 cents per user. But when you're talking about 10 cents per user over hundreds of millions, it starts to mount up, right? And the industry was very focused on acquiring as many people as possible, as cheaply as possible. There's a metric called IPM, installs per 1,000 impressions. And it's like, maximizing IPM was was the goal of many people. It was like, okay, on average, before this sort of step happened in the industry, like getting a 10 IPM was outstanding. And by the end,
so that's $10 per 1,000 ad impressions.
No, so 10 people downloaded the game from 1,000 impressions, right?
Okay, so that's like a 10. What is that? 10%? No, that's a 1% conversion rate, right?
Yeah. So what you wanted is 1% conversion from your impressions, and then it was like people were getting 20, 30, and 40, and some people got to like 50, right? And if you're talking,
wait, just to confirm, that isn't that a bit crazy? So 50% of people who saw an ad in those areas.
5%.
Sorry, yeah, but still, it's like 5 times more than usual.
Yeah, exactly. And dude, if you think about it, like if we look at some of the basic calculations, so you've got CPI, which is cost per install, times IPM, which is again installs per 1,000 impressions, equals eCPM, right? Which is the amount of money you are paying for 1,000 impressions. So what that means is if your IPM goes up, right, that means that your CPI comes down as long as your eCPM stays flat. So what that meant is everyone was trying to maximize IPM because that means they didn't need to spend any more money, but they were getting many more users for the same amount of money, right? So, like I said, if you said, or I said to you, right, give me $1,000 and I'll give you 10 users or 50 users, what would you want?
I'll probably take the 50 users, please.
Exactly, right? It's a no-brainer, and the whole industry was sucked up into this, and it was all about creating like highly marketable viral ads. Then there was some really sort of some bad ads came out of this, like the whole fake ads thing, where gameplay did not mimic the game itself, and what you then found was people were optimizing so much towards IPM that they weren't looking at the LTV and the ROAS, because it was like, if I can say my game normally had a CPI of $5, but I got the CPI down to $1, everyone was like, wow, this is amazing. But what a lot of people weren't then checking was like, was the users, were they converting and staying around, and were they driving the quality in the LTV? Because look, again, question for you, would you prefer to pay for a user, like pay $5 for a user and earn 10, or would you rather pay $1 for a user and make no money?
Well, that would depend. If I'm planning to sell my business based on how pretty my balance sheet looks like, I might do the thing that makes it look like it's a growing business.
Yeah, exactly. So you would pick the option of buying someone for 5 and earning 10, right? Because that's the logical thing.
Well, that's the thing, John. I want to point where I feel like some people wouldn't, because it would look like it's a faster growing business, because number go up in users with fixed monetization later, then they try to get acquired. I've heard a couple of conversations like that, and that's where I feel like we've got all these weird situations like mobile gaming not making money. We're like, okay, wait, the revenue is stupid, isn't it? Just because you're trying to make the balance sheet look pretty to then get acquired, because then you're playing a different game.
Yeah, look, man. It depends on like the investment landscape has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. Look, a few years ago, you would get multiples of revenue. Now you're getting multiples of EBITDA, which essentially is like net profit. With a few other things taken in.
Yeah, so there we go. So now that, but so what I'm trying to say is like objectively, a few years ago, if you're trying to get multiples of revenue, then you might as well do the thing that will give you more revenue, despite it being less gross profit. But now, if it's being measured in gross profit, hopefully we're going to get some realignment and a bit more sensible decision making.
Yeah, look, I mean, I remember when Zynga acquired Rollic, they acquired Rollic because Rollic had hundreds of millions of users. And it was before sort of ATT came and the data landscape changed. And Zynga were like, we want to get as many people. We didn't care about the money. We wanted as many people in our ecosystem as possible, because then we can cross promote, right? We can move a user from a Rollic game, which had like a dollar CPI, a dollar LTV, to a Zynga game that maybe had a $5 LTV, right? And we could like funnel people around, and it looked much healthier based on their goals at that point.
Did that work?
I mean, yeah. I think if you look at Rollic as part of the Zynga portfolio now, and which is part of the Take Two portfolio, I mean, a couple of Rollic's new games, the hybrid casual games, are doing like 100 million a year. So I think, and also they're high volume. So like they're, from a DAO perspective, I can't remember the actual stats, but I think it was like a year or two ago where Rollic made up something like 70% of the DAO of Zynga. So like that acquisition powered their user base dramatically. And now the quality of the Rollic games is starting to bring in the revenue side of stuff.
So yeah, it took a long time. That's what I'm thinking is like they had users, they probably had revenue, but like the gross profit, the EBITDA, it took a few years, if not more. I'm not sure, to actually get like a decent investment return is what I've understood.
For sure. I would say that only now that acquisition has probably been recouped because of the new games and the strategic shift into hybrid casual, which is much more sort of like revenue generating and profitable than hyper. But all in all, dude, it's you've got a point in terms of like you have to look at the market. You have to look what the market wants. You need to look at, again, where the liquidity is. You need to look at what people, like the acquirers, want. If the acquirers want huge amounts of people or they want profit, then you have to tailor your strategy depending. And that depends on if you are planning an exit or you're just happy, ticking along.
Cash flow business.
Yeah, cash flow business, right? What like too many people these days do. What they do is very simply is they raise money, they dilute, they end up giving away a huge percentage of the ownership. And eventually, because the business doesn't grow and the valuation dips because they haven't achieved what they expected, they end up making like hardly no money, right? And there's a few examples of companies out there that have sold for hundreds of millions, and the founders have got basically nothing.
I spoke with a fractional CFO, and he works with mobile gaming companies, and he said like the playbook a few years ago, let's say like 5 to 10 years ago, was, hopefully I won't butcher it, was like basically get a crazy good team together, raise a bit of money, acquire a bunch of users, use those users to make a bit more money, acquire a lot more users, and then try to get acquired, and then get more users, and then the acquisition was like the payday. But like none of these steps we were thinking about profit. And I was like, how does, like, that means the ones that like die is like zero. Where right now it's more like, how's the cash flow? Are we returning on ad spend? Like,
Exactly. It's like laser focused on everything that builds up to a beta. And a beta is just basically profit the company has. Whereas before, you're right, it was all revenue, and all of that stuff has kind of changed. But it's much healthier having an eye on this rather than just growing as big as possible.
It's like a bubble, right? It's literally about, I think, I don't want to derail the conversation, but like a lot of this AI stuff, from my understanding, they're putting all that money, or we're talking Microsoft, Twitter, because eventually the first person who cracks it will make stupid amount of money. But like objectively right now, they're burning money, but they know if they get it right, it's crazy good. So I think it's like one of those things where before it was like, well, let's just get a bunch of users because eventually we'll probably figure out how to monetize them and we'll be making crazy amount of money. But a lot of it's just like, just raise money and then later.
Yeah, and look, people should be happy with building, a sustainable business where they can take dividends every year. Like if someone said to you, "Hey, like, you can have this business for 10 years, and every year you're going to get a good salary, and you can take out like a million a year, right? And that just you just live a good life, man." But like, too many people get sort of blindsided, or it's like moths to a flame, but with an exit. Like and the industry, especially with VCs and raising, like it's such a big thing. If you have an exit next to your name, the likelihood of you getting more funding goes up tremendously.
Yeah, it's like having X. You have a stamp of approval of some sort, right? So people were, you're saying, chasing the exit despite the fact that that might not just be beneficial to their actual personal goals or what have you.
Yeah, exactly. I think you need to be a realist as to what you want to do and why, and don't just go for the exit if it doesn't align with what you want. Right? If you want to work, like again, the founder of Turborilla has been working at the company for 17 years, like, and he's happy. He's happy with the business he's built. He's made good money over the years and stuff like that. And that's what he wanted. But again, I think especially with younger people, like
Mm.
the industry kind of says the way that you get acknowledgement and the big accolade is to build something and sell something, and then that's it. Whereas that's not the right thing for everyone. Some people just want to have purpose, work in a company that they love, and again, like you that's what you can do. And not every company needs to be a unicorn, right? You could be a company that makes 10 million, 20 million, 100 million a year. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Isn't it crazy to say that? There's nothing wrong with making 100 million a year. It's like someone needs to hear that.
Yeah, I know, right?
So what do you want, John?
Oh, dude, look, from my perspective, I'm just happy being me. Like I'm in an industry I love. My goal in life over the last 15 years was to become CEO of a game studio. And it's literally what I've dreamed of. I every day love what I do, and I'm also fortunate that I've had some success and I have had an exit and I have got money behind me, and that has changed my options in life, and it has helped me upgrade my lifestyle, give my kids a better life, which my purpose for living is my family, right? Like family first in every description. I want to be the best dad I can be, I want the best husband I can be, I want to give my family the best life they can have. But equally, this has allowed me to widen my experience by investing in other companies, right? And I've also, off the back of that, got a number of advisory gigs, and I get to work with not only being the leader of my own company in Turborilla, but I get to support, help, mentor some of the smartest founders in the industry. And ultimately, if those companies are then successful, I also have other ways to make money, and so I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the space, Harry. I get to like I'm literally doing every day what I love. you know I've been successful to a degree, and yeah, I get to work with really cool people. My whole thing right now, and the next X amount of years in my life, I want to work with cool people on cool shit. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, and you can do that because you've put in the work. Because, like, I like what you said. Like, you're not beholden now to one thing. You're beholden to what John Wright wants because you've got, let's say, some cash behind you. But also, if something doesn't work out, it's okay. It's not going to give you anxiety necessarily because you've got multiple things going on, which I think in turn, because you're less stressed, will probably make decision making a lot better. You can probably sleep at night. You're not thinking, "Oh my god, woe is me. I can't
Yeah.
fix this thing," because you've got all these things going. So no, love it. I want to ask you, in terms of the mobile gaming. So, what separates like a good game with a game that's like worth scaling? So, like a mobile game that is quote unquote good, enjoyable, good users, but then what's one that is actually scalable? We should put money in.
Yeah, I mean, look, with games, the first thing and foremost is, and believe it or not, people forget this, right? Because gaming has been so, mobile gaming has been so sort of focused on on like metrics and stuff over the last couple of years and maximizing stuff, people forget that the first and most basic thing about games is they need to be fun. Okay. And so, like, developing a fun game, what does that mean? So, initially, it means developing a core loop which engages with people. And how do you measure engagement, or like the amount of, or people that find it fun? That comes from retention, right? So the basic way of looking at it is, if you build something and people come back time and time again, that they obviously enjoy it, right? And they want to play it and they want to engage in it and it's fun. So again, you can look at very different games and different genres over the market, but there is different levels. Like if you look at some of the let's say like match free, right? We'll use like King as the gold standard example, but King for a long time were making match free games and they were doing it very successfully. And look, Candy Crush, Soda and Saga, and all these other games, they've made billions of dollars, right? Billions, like multiple games in the franchise, billions. And then you add Dream Games come along from Turkey and then create Royal Match. And that kind of started competing against King. And in my opinion, what Royal Match did really well is they innovated on the initial concept of what King built, and they made it more fun. They developed the game a bit further. It wasn't just about the core loop, but it was the meta progression, it was the events, it was the live ops. They built out community. They started doing really crazy marketing campaigns with people like LeBron James. Like they really elevated the standard. Like they took something that was great or good already, and then they made it great. And the same thing could be said with things like Monopoly Go, Harry. Like Monopoly Go essentially is Coin Master, which has been reskinned and put on a board with an IP that is recognizable. But they've taken good and made it great by giving it more depth, more relatability, and just overall more content, which is also very important. This is where like events and live ops and integrations, all of this stuff comes to be. So yeah, I think, to sum up, basically, you have to make sure that is fun, and the fun will allow you to build retention. Strong retention allows strong monetization, right? Because if more people are coming back more often, then you've got more opportunities to, sell them stuff, which is in-app purchases, or you've got, more time in front of them to show ads. But all of it comes back down to, is it fun? And do people like playing it?
Is that step one when you're making a game? Retention?
So a lot of the time, if we look at the standard sort of like publishing roadmap, shall we say, so you normally have a couple of milestones. You have MVP, minimal viable product. This essentially is a game that has probably 1 to 2 hours of content. It's, again, very probably core loop focused, X number of levels or an X number of gameplay, but probably doesn't have like the meta and the progression and the live ops, because you have to start off small at the beginning.
You might as well validate that before starting doing a whole bunch of metagame stuff, because that's expensive.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. And that's the thing. So what, a lot of the time what you're doing is you're building these MVPs, which are effectively prototypes. You're then integrating a Facebook SDK. You're then running some marketing through Meta. And what you're trying to establish very simply is, like, what is the level of engagement with this? Because the other thing is, if it's a great game and the metrics are good, but the amount of people that want to play it is very small, like, having 50% day one retention, but only 100 people want to play it, doesn't matter, right? It needs to be scalable. And so, like, again, what the meta testing stage allows you to test a few things. It allows you to have a cohort of users come through, so you can monitor things like day one retention. And again, most companies, if you're not making at least day one 30 to 35%, the game will be instantly killed, right? Because
is that a good thing?
Well, the idea is that you need to have winning concepts, because I've never seen, but it's this traditional like turd polishing analogy, right? It's like, it's really hard, really, really hard to take something from 30% to 45%, right? That could take years of work, and years of work equals, so like, again, simple math. If we can take something and it takes 6 months, right, and it's say 100k a month, that means that the production cost of the business of the game is 600k. But if that takes 12 months, that's 1.2 million. And some businesses don't have that, dude, right? So what you need to do is find a great foundation and starting layer. So if you're not getting, say, 35% day one, in my opinion, it's probably best to continue to iterate and find new prototypes and find something that will break that barrier, because anything beneath it will take a lot of time, and time equals money, and money that you might not have, right? Like it's all game, especially mobile games, everything is for about, cash flow and profitability and revenue. And if you don't have cash flow, you don't have profitability, then you have to raise money. Raising money right now is very difficult and very expensive, so you don't really want to do that. So you've got to be much more realistic with the shots you take, because you won't, otherwise you'll run out of money.
Yeah, you only have a certain amount of shots, right?
Exactly that. And again, the amount of shots you've got is depending on the cash you have. And so yeah, look, for me, making sure that day one retention is above 35% is very important. Making sure that the session length is good, like 20 to 30 minutes. What that means is either someone's played it for 30 minutes in one sitting, or they've played it 5 minutes in 6 sittings, But either way, we want to make sure that people are playing in the game and it's sticky. And then the final point is around the CPI. Like, how much is this going to cost? Because again, if you have, day one 40% retention, but the CPI is $20, it's not going to be feasible, right?
What do you think about people who say they should do that before, right? I've been seeing more and more people saying, let's find out what the CPI is and then build the game for that ad.
Yeah, look, some people do it. Like, some people, before they have like an established MVP, some people will make much smaller prototypes. So what I mean by this is they'll have just a scene in Unity with a very simple,
like a playable ad.
Yeah, you could. I mean, some people used to use playable ads for prototyping and getting some engagement and understanding like that. But a lot of the time, people just would run videos of initial gameplay and core loop on Facebook, and instead of having a game to test retention, all they're doing is seeing how low the CPC is. So instead of firing them to an app, you're firing them to a web page saying like coming soon,
waitlist.
Yeah, and you're just monitoring.
Isn't that objectively a better thing to do? Because if you're saying we're going to build a gameplay loop, check if it's good, and then build the ad, but then what if the ad, you never find a way to do it? So why not just do the ad first?
So the thing is, like, just because it's marketable doesn't mean it's going to have it be good quality, and the retention is just basically so vital. Like the CPI could be optimized down, right? Like people spend millions a year trying to beat their hero creatives. Why? And the hero creative, very simply, is the number one creative for your game in that chosen network, country, and OS, right?
That's all findable, right? Like, I found that really crazy. Like, you can just go and see, okay, what's the best ad right now that is making money?
Go Sensor Tower, go to Facebook, like Meta Ad Library, go to App Magic, any of these companies. Like, you can go and you'll find the best performing ad. But it doesn't mean you can't just like rip it and be like, I'm going to make this exact ad, because it might not match your audience.
I've seen that though.
It doesn't. And don't get me wrong, it's a viable strategy for a lot of people. And this is how innovation happens: is like someone does something different, and then someone looks at it, either copies it or does a +1 where they make an alteration, etc. But ultimately, yeah, you're still going back to the retention is the most the biggest validator of if the game is going to be successful. And the thing that's changed over the last couple of years is the day one retention was like king originally. But now, because CPIs have gone up and the cost of acquiring users has gone up, it's like day 7 and day 30 is much more impactful than just day one. So what's happening is a lot of publishers are saying to developers, oh, look, your day one's great, but it means nothing. Like, now you have to show me day 7. And the issue with that is,
that's a lot of content.
That's a lot of content, exactly. The developer has to go back and spend months building out enough content to get to day 7. And some of the publishers won't back that. They won't cover the burn, right? They'll just say, you go away, spend 6 months. And again, that could be 50k a month. That could be 300 grand, right? Which the studio doesn't have. And they're unable to raise that money because VCs are not investing in these sort of earlier stage projects now. So if they haven't had previous success and have money from angels or something like that, it becomes even more difficult to
You've got
get
a
that.
bootstrap, right? You just pretty much got a bootstrap, make a little bit of money. Then I don't know if you know about. Maybe this is a tangent, but like there's companies now that can lend you money if you're already making money, and you
Yeah,
don't have to kind of
PVX.
raise it.
Yeah, there's some great companies out there like PVX that do like UA lending, but the problem is that means you have to have a previous success. If you're a new studio and this is your first game, you can't rely on that, right?
Got it. So, what kind of new? Let's talk to those new studios if you don't mind. Like your new studio, you like mobile gaming, you want to make a mobile game, and like you said, they now need day 7 retention. Should they just give up? Is it a matter of try a different strategy? Because from what I'm hearing, if the standard is a 50K a month team, and you have to do that for 6 months to get something that could do well, people don't have 300K. But like, if you're a new studio, what can you do?
Yeah, look, a lot of people now are focusing more teams in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, where the production costs of studios are cheaper. This is one of the big reasons Turkey exploded in the last 5 to 10 years was because of that. The quality versus cost of
Yeah.
producing games was like was amazing. Like you had great people for a low price. So that's why it's become much harder. Like if you look at like Finland and the UK and America, it's much more difficult for new studios to exist and launch in these countries because of the expense.
Do you think it's only about the expense?
Maybe it's not like totally about the expense. There's also things like government grants and trying to get the countries themselves to invest into gaming and help bootstrap companies and there's a few things going on at the moment. The UK just launched a $30 million, £30 million gaming fund and
Do
and
you think that's going to work? Do you think that's? I haven't looked into it enough to see, but like, what's your first impression of that?
Yeah, look, I'm very fortunate to know Nick Button Brown, who's probably the number one angel investor in games in the UK, pretty well. We're part of the same angel group and invest in businesses together. And Nick's been spearheading this, and I think it's an amazing thing for us because other countries have similar things, and we haven't had that. And equally, the UK had this for music and film, but they didn't have it for games, right? So now, what this basically means, Harry, is there's going to be more accessible cash at earlier stages to get people to that prototype.
Oh wow! So they could invest in a situation where I get a day 1 prototype, I have numbers, and there will be someone somewhere where I can pitch to get the money for a day 7.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the cost and stuff like that. Like, the amount of money that the people are going to invest, I think is more like 100 to 200K or something like that. But that could be enough, like, to get you from day one. Like, depending on the size of your team and all of that stuff. But you need to be inventive. Like, I wrote an article for Games Forum a while back about like how to get investment in today's market when VCs are less likely, and government standards, angels, even like research grants from universities. Like one of my companies raised 450K from a Norwegian education institute to do some psychology stuff to do with the games. And it's like, so you have to be inventive, dude, like to find that money if you haven't got it right. If you've had a previous success and you can invest 250K of your own money because you believe in it, then you're golden. But equally, the people that have been successful before are more likely to get VC money, right? Which is where the problem comes. Like,
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing is to be people with money tend to make more money, but to get that first step, if you're inventive, like we were in kind of our careers, like I think we touched on earlier in the podcast, like there is a way, and it doesn't involve usually millions of pounds, or it's more about the network or bootstrapping it to a certain point to get recognition, whether it's a grant or what have you.
Yes, exactly, dude. Exactly. I think you've got to have, some tenacity. You need to understand that, there's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to money and investment. Don't just put all of your time. And this is the other thing. I speak to a lot of founders about, like, again, the industry standard or what people think is the industry standard is, I build a prototype, get to an MVP, get some early metrics, and I go to a VC and the VC will give me money. And then they spend 6 months, instead of doubling down on the product, they get all encompassed by raising money. And then they don't end up building the best product they could have, right? And that in turn means that the likelihood of them getting money from the VCs is also less because, again, raising is very, very difficult. So you've just got to be a bit of a realist, understand what you want to try and achieve. If you can, again, if you needed 50K or 100K to finish something, then maybe again going to some angels and getting, going to some family members and getting them to back you is much more realistic and quicker than spending 6 months to, pitching to 10 VCs and then getting no money in the end, right? It's because the game isn't in the state for them to be able to tick their boxes.
For sure. And I think I had one of the earlier podcasts a few weeks ago that came out, which was with Bobby from Kando Factory. And yeah, that podcast did really well, and it touched on this point. Like, some of these VC won't have the time or the logistics to give you proper feedback, and you just kind of fishing in the dark, and you're not getting any traction when you could have a conversation with John, Bobby, Harry, and I could maybe point you in the right direction, and then find out, like, this is their investment thesis right now. That means I need to change everything, rather than just go knocking on doors, finally get your nose, and you're like, shit, I've not done anything.
You've touched on a very, very important point there, Harry, which many people don't speak about. And I actually I mentioned this to you when we were on stage in Manchester a couple of months ago. But like, understanding the VC or the publisher thesis is highly important, because the nature of VCs and publishers is to never turn away an opportunity. Like, or they try and keep things as open as possible, even if it's not the right time for them. So what that means is you might think as the developer that you're much more likely to get some money from either the publisher or the VC, but actually the game that you have does not match their thesis. So, these companies are looking to invest in games with AI, or they're looking to invest in puzzle games, and you've got an FPS, and they don't know anything about FPSs. Right, and that means that their user acquisition team, their monetization team, their product team, their development team, their production team don't know the style of games that you have, so they can't add like the same level of value if it was something that did match their thesis. So like, it's so important for developers to ask that question and get an early answer and understand if your game matches what they're looking for. Because there's also, from a VC perspective, you have LPs, right? And LPs are essentially the people that put in big chunks of money. And the LPs are the ones that kind of sign off on what that thesis is, right? So the VC will come to them and say, okay, our thesis is that we want to invest in AI. And then these LP goes, great, okay, that matches what we want. Here's a couple of million. And then the VC can't deploy that cash to anything but what that thesis is.
Yeah, it's a checkbox. Even if objectively it was a good opportunity, it's like, well, sorry, the money wants what it wants. And I think the world is smaller than people think. Like, there might be one VC that fits your thesis, and if they say no, then you can't just hope for the best. It's just logistically nothing's going to change.
Mm-hmm. And look, you also have something called an investment committee, an IC, with a VC, right? So every deal, before it gets finalized, has to go to the investment committee. And the investment committee, their job is to make sure that this stuff matches what the LPs want. So even if the guy you're dealing with is saying all of the best stuff that you can ever hear, doesn't mean that it's going to go the distance. So understanding the thesis is highly, highly important. Can't stress it enough.
Just want to close off here. Like, you do, well, at least you did before joining Turborilla, like we said before the podcast. Like, this is your first podcast in a while, but like, you post a lot on LinkedIn, you share a lot, you go to a lot of conferences, you speak about, like, what's that motivation there? Especially now, like, you probably don't have the time to be doing this, objectively speaking. But like, why do you still invest time in posting on LinkedIn and doing podcasts?
Yeah, honestly, man, I just want to give back. Like, gaming's been good for me. Gaming changed my life. I've been more successful, made more money doing this than anything I could have ever done. And, I'm at that point in my career, in my life, where I want to try and help people. And I look back on my journey. And again, if I think to myself, if I would have asked for help, and if there was someone else out there who could help me in that early stage to help direct me and give me, some direction and stuff, then maybe I would have been in games earlier. So for me, it's like, again, it's just, paying forward everything, that all the good that has happened for me in this industry. Equally, I have had mentors, I have had good people, good managers, good leadership that have helped me out over the last 15 years. So I get a lot out of, that helping the industry in that way. But equally, on maybe a selfish thing, what's good for gaming is what's good for me, right? A high tide rises all ships. And so if I can help, educate people, help studios become more successful, more games launch, that increases again, the revenue in the games industry overall, and the CAGR, year on year. Then that's again, it just fulfills me. It makes me happy, and overall, it helps me directionally in some way.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that. I learned that lesson by accident very early. that it is selfish to be selfless. So I don't know how much I've told you about this, but like I used to make my money professionally gambling. That's how I made money.
Yeah,
I
you
used
told me before. Yeah.
I used to rinse the UK bookies, and the reason I made loads of money was part of the group I was in. It was like a Facebook group. I made a Discord, and I was like, all the people who are good is like, hey, I'm making a group with everyone, and I'm going to be sharing everything that I'm learning, and then some people will share back. But it was quite funny where it was actually a zero-sum game at some point, because if a lot of people knew of a hack, the bookie would patch it and would make less money. But in my head, I'm like, I'm just going to tell everything in the hope that people will tell me stuff which will make me more money. And I definitely lost some of the kind of edges after a few months, but I literally 10, 20x from the little tip that someone told me about this, or how to scale this thing, or by the way, this whole way of making money exists. And yeah, I feel the same with this podcast. I'll just give everything, because you never know who's listening, or you never know who's going to help. And just every single time I do anything, I think I'm very similar to you. Like, I'll give the time to help. And it was funny. I did an exercise recently. I have a business coach, and he said, right from touch point to sign, cash collected, how I signed all my clients, half of them were some very weird roundabout way from me just giving a good conversation to someone, who then recommended to someone in a taxi, who then got into here. And I was like, if I never did all these exercises, which objectively didn't make money or took a lot of time, like half of my business wouldn't exist. And I was like, until you do the exercise, sometimes it's hard to realize like how much comes back, and it feels good.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Like I said, I think we as people, we're sociable creatures. We're tribal. We like being around people. We like helping people. Like, from a basic standpoint, not everyone. Some people are twats, but most people, want to go through life and be happy and help people. And I think that's the way I want to just spend my life. Like I said, I want to work on cool stuff with cool people. So I'm really happy with where Turborilla is. We have got a new season coming out in a week, which will be great. So that's that new content drop. And my family life is amazing. I just adopted my 2 sons last week, so
Congrats again.
Very
so good.
And yeah, all my other stuff and all the other time I spend with founders and stuff like that, I love doing it. So I think, if you do what you're passionate about, if you do what you love, and you generally have a good intent, then this is the way to go through life, basically.
Love it. Closing now, I want to ask you, based on this conversation we had, is there something that we haven't said? Is there maybe something like underhyped in mobile games right now? Is there anything you would add?
No, I would say like maybe not underhyped, but I think I did a post about this on LinkedIn, I think yesterday, and it got a lot of traction. But there's a world of people out there who are trying to pitch investment to me at the moment, personally, that are looking for like basically vibe coding games. And there is some amazing tools out there, Claude and stuff like this, which will allow you to build an early stage prototype or a product. But me personally right now, I think there's a lot of people, again, trying to raise money, trying to get investment, saying like, we don't need engineers. We can just, use this AI to build a game. And the games are much more complicated than that, Harry. And maybe in 3 to 5 years, these technologies and AIs will be able to build a game, but games are tough, man. Economics, monetization, user acquisition, content, behavioral economics, motivations, personas, segmentation. Like, these things are really, really tough. And like I said, there's just a lot of people, again, think that just making the best game possible is going to yield a massively successful business, and it doesn't work like that. Like economics and design and all of this other stuff has to be baked into that from the beginning. And yeah, AI isn't there yet. Maybe in 3 years, maybe in 5 years. But
John, I don't think it's ever going to be there because of like first principles. Because games, and I have this in my agency, right? Like GBT came out halfway through. I started my LinkedIn ghostwriting agency, and there's loads of people writing content. And so you would think, and there's whole companies that are built for this now, my job is gone. Well, actually, no, it's actually gotten a lot better because it's all relative. If a game where it is built by AI is good, then if you take the same resources and add humans into it, then probably the game that this one's going to make, objectively, will be better. So therefore, vibe coding will always be below someone else unless the core idea and the game loop is so good, then sure. But like if you just add people to the mix, you objectively be better. And because people choose where to put their time, it doesn't matter. It's like for me, like the NFT things, like it's not the fact that you can make art, which is the reason people are spending money. It's just because it was worth something maybe in the later. It's like it wasn't the art. It wasn't the art. It was all the story behind the art. So like, yeah, I just think first principles, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, look, dude, my whole thing is I think it will help people create really fun prototypes very quickly. It will help the ability to test things like what we were talking about earlier, trying to early metrics. But as soon as you've got something that you think, oh wow, like these metrics looking good, you then have to get people involved and rebuild it in a scalable way, right? Because otherwise you're just gonna have really bad code. And if you ask any techie person, they'll talk about spaghetti code. And spaghetti code is just, it's something that could take you normally an hour, takes you a day because you have to unpick everything, you have to rewrite, you have to do this, and that makes it unscalable. So yeah, like that's why I think it's not going to succeed right now. And there's probably people out there who disagree with me, but I don't care.
Honestly, even if it's scalable, it will be uncompetitive because there's a company doing it the right way, and they're going to last longer than you. Like it's so weird to me. But yeah, really cool, lovely. Everyone who's stuck around to the end, anything? How can people get in touch? Is there anything happening right now that you would like them to do? Is Turborilla hiring at some point? How can people get in touch?
Yeah, do you know what, dude? Obviously, I've still only been at the company for a little while, so we're still sort of, finding our feet a little bit with me as leadership. We're on a great trajectory. But the big things, obviously, you can look for me on LinkedIn. You can check out turborilla.com if you want to look at the games. Please go to the App Store and download them. Mad Skills Motocross 3 is our big game. There's a new season dropping next week, which means new materials, new creatives, new events, and all of that stuff. So it would be a really fun time to download the game, knowing that this drops next week. And that's it, really. Hopefully some people have learned something, and it's helped a few people today with the stuff that we've gone over. I've had a lot of fun. I love spending time with you, Harry, as always. So yeah, I'm happy, man.
John, likewise, really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, by the time this podcast is out, the new season's out. So definitely, download the game and check it out. And of course, if you've listened to this part and you send a connection request to John Wright and you mention, hey, I just listened to this podcast in the Game Playbook, I'm pretty sure he will say yes. So take advantage. Yeah, because most people won't do it. So the few that do, they can get in touch. Sweet. John, thank you so much. And yeah, everyone at home, subscribe and have a later. See you later.
Thanks, guys.